The reason Justin Baldoni has so many female supporters is not because he centers women, it's precisely because he doesn't. The most persuasive and insidious men are never openly misogynistic. They're the ones who use feminist language and create a narrative around themselves in that tone precisely so they can't be questioned. And this is exactly the kind of thing that draws male centered women to them like moths to a flame because they don't care to learn about or dismantle power structures. They just want to belong to one under the limited protection of a benevolent patriarch. That's exactly what is happening here because the way that some of you women are twisting yourselves into a pretzel to ride for this man and explain his behavior when the narrative that he crafted in order to draw you into this public dispute is crumbling with every single piece of evidence that's being released instead of being strengthened by the evidence. And he's having to drop accusation after accusation as he realizes that he is not dealing with a court of public opinion here. He is dealing with an actual court that requires evidence and documentation. And so the fact that even in the court of public opinion, every time, every single time, his camp or any other camp releases evidence, it seems to be working against him, is just indicative of the fact that he has had people fooled for a long time. And now that stuff is coming out from behind the scenes, that should be the conclusion we're making. Instead, the very people who were fooled by him from the beginning are doubling down because they don't want to look stupid. But let me just dispel that notion for you and tell you that we already think you look fucking stupid. That ship has sailed. You're not going to look any more stupid continuing to double down and defend this man. You're going to look smarter if you can apply just 1 ounce to critical thinking to any of the pieces of evidence that have come out against him, including this email from his PR team regarding the highly debated promo for the film that apparently Blake wanted to steal all of the promo, all the coverage. She wanted to do all the interviews and she wanted to just steal his spotlight and he's having to do PR in the basement, whatever. Come to find out, that was literally his team's decision. This email is literally evidence that his team is panicking and trying to keep him from doing any more PR because he effed it up so colossally that they had to go in through like the back channels and get a tape pulled and everything like that, because this man can literally not be trusted to not be a raging misogynist. And the reason that's problematic is exactly because of what he has positioned himself as. And so you have to understand that by continuing to defend him, you're denying your own critical thinking. Because if we read this email, it's all very clearly laid out why he was not allowed to do any promo except for from the basement or whatever he said. Okay, I'm going to read it from my computer because that is too small for me to read from my own screen. Okay, so you guys can look at this and I'll read it from here. So it says, "Hi, Jacob. I just alerted Josh about this, but Justin is basically alluding to graping Atlas out of Lily when talking to the Dallas Morning News. We cut the tape, but he is a moron. Josh said he shouldn't do any more press, but he has a lot left, so maybe we can talk ASAP. Jacob, he said he wants to do a call with Justin and his publicist. Will you see if that's still what he wants?" And this is the direct quote from Justin Baldoni to the Dallas interview. "For me, what that scene was more about was Ryle feeling like he had lost all power and feeling so insecure and jealous that the only way in his mind that he could show her how much he loved her was, and I won't say the word that we used in developing it, but what was essentially to force any love she had for Atlas out of her." So Ryle's motivation, if you're talking about character motivation or why he did what he did from the filmmaking perspective and from the actor perspective, was he was trying to, in his twisted mind, love Atlas out of her. There's another word we used, and I'm sure in your imagination you can go there. So what he's describing here is SA, and then what he is doing is like framing the character's motivation in a way that implies grape as a tool to erase another man from a woman. Now, obviously, whether some men think like this or not is irrelevant here because of the way that this discussion was couched, the way that he centered the feelings of the abuser. He didn't center the experience of the woman. He centered her abuser's feelings and basically couches sexual violence in the language of love. When what a real feminist, supposedly huge feminist of a man would have done would have been to explain that to a rapist, to an abuser, none of these things are about love. They are about power. You are not supposed to sympathize with a jealous, insecure man, especially as a man who once again has claimed himself to be feminist and has positioned himself as like a champion of women's rights, would definitely not center the abuser's narrative in this. He would have centered the narrative of the truth and the narrative of the victim, if anything. But instead, he is like, yeah, we really wanted this idea of twisted love, erasing another man. All of that is language that centers the feelings and motivations of an abuser as like something to be better understood or something to be sympathized or empathized with, which is so fucked up. And like at this point, you really have to be willfully blind to continue insisting that this man is anything but a run-of-the-mill pseudo-intellectualist, pseudo-feminist who really still thinks that the world should cater to and understand all the feelings of men and not women. And this is so common among these male creatives. This is probably why Blake wanted more control of the script, because this has probably been happening to her whole life. These pseudo-intellectual, pseudo-feminist male creatives that confuse explanation with empathy. They literally do not see a difference between the two things, and they really believe that in order to be serious artists, they need to fully explore the inner life and the inner workings and the inner mind of a fucked up abuser. And instead of focusing on the harm that abuse causes, they focus on, well, what inner pain, what inner turmoil did this man have to go through and experience in order to end up as such a huge piece of shit? What pain made him do this? What inner suffering, drove him to such a desperate act as raping a woman? And so as a result, the audience spends more time trying to understand and empathize with the abuser rather sitting with the victim's reality. So you're giving context that turns into justification rather than giving context that explains the power dynamics and that explains, an abuser's actual mindset. And not to mention framing violence as an emotional expression. He didn't know how else to love. He felt powerless. He felt jealous. He felt insecure. And so this was just his way of expressing it. No, he could have just expressed his jealousy and insecurity with his words. Instead, he violated a woman. Instead, he raped a woman. And so you're basically reframing abuse as emotional overflow that turned tragic, or like some kind of misguided attempt at connection, which is not what it is. It's abuse is abuse, plain and simple. And it has to do with power dynamics, not with love or connection or rejection. It's an assertion of power. It's not misdirected love. And I also can't stand the way that these guys will always inevitably end up framing the woman as a symbol and not a person. Like she's still an object. She's basically either a catalyst for male pain or a battleground where two men are competing to like erase one another, or proof of another man's insecurity, or just like more male main character syndrome. It's her inner life and her trauma and her agency in the situation is all completely secondary. And so the story becomes not about what happened to the woman, which is what this movie was supposed to be about. It becomes about what happened to a man because of a woman, which is a very patriarchal way of of processing things for a feminist man. It just tells you that he hasn't really done the work and that he hasn't really deconstructed the power dynamics or attempted to subvert or flip them in any way. He is perpetrating them, in fact. And we live in a time that his PR firm realizes that that's bad for optics. And that's why they took him off the PR press tour. And that's why Blake took over, because they realized that he is still thinks in exactly the same terms as the very abuser that he is supposed to be portraying in a movie that is supposed to be all about how to spot these abuse tactics and not about how to excuse them. And this is the problem with men taking over on the stories that are meant to be told by women about women, because they prioritize the relatability of the male character with over the lived reality of women everywhere and femmes and women everywhere. They only want to ask, how do I make him relatable and understandable to the audience? Because there's always a reason why he did what he did. But they don't ever ask, how can I still honor what happened to the woman, her experience, without completely without negating it and excusing it. And they love these pseudo-feminist, pseudo-intellectual men love nothing more than to sit around and pontificate women's reality as if it's this question of as if it's this sophisticated next level conversation that can be where there's this depth and ambiguity and let's sit in the gray area and dull the impact of the very real abuse that happens to women day in and day out. But yeah, let's sit with the abuser and let's think about what could have caused him, what pushed him over the edge. We're always so worried about the women victims, apparently, that we're never so worried about why men actually do what they do. We're worried about pontificating and intellectualizing about it as if it's not a very real and visceral thing that affects and takes women's lives every day. Every day. Sexual violence is not one of those things that becomes more philosophical when you blur the lines. It becomes more dangerous because you're actually making light of the harm that's happening. Harm is not aesthetics, okay? The harm of women is not meant to frame abuse in poetic language or metaphor, okay? Or, implying something instead of naming it, which is exactly what Justin did. Force the love out of her. Take something back. Claim what's his. You are literally trying to put aesthetics to violence. He hit me and it felt like a kiss type shit. No, it's not aesthetic as something to be better understood or something to be sympathized or empathized with, which is so fucked. And many of these male creatives will fight tooth and nail to prove that this is not what they're actually doing, that they're actually a good guy, they're a champion of women, etc. They put on the feminist hat, they put on this whole act and everything, and they don't realize that really being a feminist, the uncomfortable part of actually being a male feminist is pointing out the instances in which you benefit from power, is actually supposed to focus on trying to subvert your own power. Instead, they focus on trying to defend their image as these good men. They're like, no, but I reject misogyny. They genuinely believe that their intent is the same as the impact that it had. So when criticized, they're always like, yeah, but I didn't mean it that way, and that's not what I meant, and I was just trying to blah, blah, blah. And instead of just taking the criticism from women and being like, yeah, I fucked up, that was wrong, that would actually build trust with the community. But instead, you're just reaffirming the default perspective that men don't really have to think about this stuff, that it's enough for men to just call themselves a feminist and then follow that up with just doing whatever the fuck they want anyway. There's no real accountability. We are perpetuating the status quo. And this is exactly why he attracts so many female supporters that are, at the end of the day, male-centered. Okay? This is not the reason why Justin Baldoni has so many female supporters is not a paradox. It's the inevitable outcome of him as a man positioning himself this way. He performs safe masculinity while still centering men. Like the fact that he spent more time trying to identify with, get in the head of, give interviews about the perspective of the abuser is just a testament to how well he's able to package and, speak fluently this language of male feminist ally that's bringing like a different perspective, and he's helping women understand. And it's like, no, while this is incredibly appealing to women who are so tired of misogynistic men, you need to understand that this is a narrative that he's crafting. He sounds feminist while still telling stories that are focused on male perspective, male redemption, and the rich and complex inner world of a male abuser. And that's what he's doing. And it feels like progress, but the structure hasn't changed. Women oftentimes feel seen by men like this, but they don't understand that these men are still failing to center them narratively. The story is still not about a woman who was abused and rose above that or whatever. It's a story about men's trauma now that he has a hold of it. That's the PR that he was doing. And that's why his firm was like, we got to pull him off the PR. A lot of us as women are very particularly prone to being played by this particular brand of feminist man. We as women are taught to empathize with men first, even above ourselves. We're socialized to understand men's trauma. We're socialized to excuse men's behavior. And we are socialized to look for the hurt little boy who is like acting out and lashing out and can't help himself. Because those are the narratives that men craft in order to excuse their abuse of women. And while they can't come out and say the stuff outright anymore, they can and do, like Justin, frame it in terms of insecurity, fear, the need for emotional validation, emotional confusion on the man's part. And when women hear those buzzwords, they tap into a certain kind of script. And it's a script that tells them this is a self-aware man. This is a patriarchy-aware man. This is a man who's aware of how to pull the strings. He's validating you, but not challenging the system. He's saying, I hear you, I believe you, I'm different. But believing women and even telling stories of women's abuse does not guarantee that a man has decentered the male perspective and decentered men himself. Like, he is still falling for these same narratives himself. He's prioritizing a male perspective over the real lived experience of women. He did not want to relinquish the narrative control. He did not want to decenter the male perspective, and he did not want to let the audience sit with the truth of what happened. He wanted to attach a male explanation to it so that it couldn't be questioned. He's affirming the patriarchy. He's not disrupting it. And a lot of women fall hook, line, and sinker for this because he offers women a good man to believe in. He offers women this idea in a very misogynistic culture, a man who appears self-aware and reflective and gentle or whatever, kind of becomes a beacon of hope, especially again to male-centered women who want to believe that there's like a confused little boy inside every power-hungry, misogynistic man. He's like their messiah. So criticism of him to his supporters feels like an attack on progress. It's an attack on a good man, a threat to the idea that good men exist. And ultimately, it's a loss that a lot of women don't want to face. They don't want to come out and say, I feel stupid because I supported him. And this is exactly why so many women feel like they have to or feel so compelled to do the emotional labor for Justin. They're the ones out here defending him against the evidence coming out of his own side of the court, against the evidence that is condemning him. And the more that they defend him, the more they become sort of invested in him. And it's like creates the Benjamin Franklin effect. It's like, no, I like him so much. Like, I will die on this hill. Meanwhile, there's like so many women out there that are like, I don't even like Blake Lively, but like, this is crazy. And they're viewed as the ones that are out of line. And it's like, no, the women that are really out of line, disconnected with feminism as a movement, is women who have over invested in a man as a symbol of hope that there are good men out there. That's the game that the patriarchy wants you to play. You have to think more critically than that. Representation is not liberation. You guys do understand that at the heart of this whole dispute, there was a man who wanted all the credit for being a champion of a woman, for being this feminist beyond the shadow of a doubt kind of ally that made a movie by himself that, you know, shows the woman's perspective so well and so deeply. But when women offered their opinions and said, hey, I don't think this is how it would play out. I don't think we should do this, X, Y, and Z, whatever. He was upset. He took that personal because he wanted to be the one to tell a woman's story. That at the end of the day, that is the only dispute that's happening here. He wanted to do all the PR for a movie about a woman written by a woman. He wanted to get all the credit for his deep understanding of feminism. He wanted to get the platform, the authority. He wanted to be the only one to speak into the microphone, to direct, act, fund, executive produce, edit, make all the decisions on, etc. That is weird. And women just get the feeling of being included and like being seen. And they're so lucky that this feminist man took on this whole undertaking of telling a woman's story. How is this not beyond obvious? I don't know. And I know that the disillusionment hurts, but at some point you're no longer defending a feminist man. The man is being exposed for having never been feminist, for really wanting that platform to serve him and not the cause of women's rights or anything like that. Because if that would have been the focus and the case, then why did he want all the control? Why did he want to write the narrative, direct the narrative, center himself in the narrative? Why did he center the abuser in the narrative every chance he got, to the point where his own people were like, he's a moron, we need to pull him from every PR from here on out. We need to have a meeting. We need to address this because this is the man that people are going to associate with our film. And his team, mind you, cynically, his team was like, this is going to hurt sales. This, if people can pinpoint the fact that this whole thing was mangled by a man who sympathizes more with the abuser in this movie than he does the victim, this movie's not going to market well. If they can cynically see the problem with his mindset, then why, if you're a woman who centers other women, if you're a woman who calls yourself a feminist, why the fuck would you defend him when his own people were literally trying to figure out how to stop him from causing more harm? Anyways, I hope this helps. Psyop upon psyop is happening here, and we need to be aware of it, especially us women who are not allergic to critical thinking and who are not misogynistic at our core to the point of being willing to defend a diabolical man just because he's likable or he represents, you know, something that we don't have enough of in the culture. That becomes problematic too. If he's really the feminist that he is, then my questions are only starting to pile up for his supporters because A, why did you start a misogynistic smear campaign against Blake Lively online? B, why did you not release the footage that was supposedly going to exonerate you instead of doing A? And C, how come even when trying to explain, you know, the point of why this movie was made, even when trying to speak on behalf of the victims, why did he still center and empathize with the abuser in that narrative and spend so much time trying to get inside the head of the abuser? Picture yourself being a woman on that set. Picture yourself being a woman who's expected to cater to this man's every whim as he continues to expose himself almost quite literally behind closed doors every chance he gets. He's turning around, grabbing women's arms in the car, and saying shit like, well, I didn't always get consent for everything I did. Don't tell anybody I said this. He's showing his wife's birth videos to people without their consent. He's talking about the kind of pornography he used to watch. He's making women uncomfortable. Multiple women from that set have come forward and said, we stand with Blake. We also felt uncomfortable. And some of you women have your tongue so far up his asshole that you can't see the facts anymore. And I just would implore you to reconsider, because I promise you that ship has sailed. You can no longer defend this man as being a feminist and a champion of women or women's rights. So Godspeed.